Welcome back to the Blitz Crosstalk. I'm Brianna Dix, joined by my co-host and former NFL scout, Brian Broaddus. Brian, happy Christmas week.
Happy Christmas week to you as well. You're reasonably young to this football doing stuff.
Yes.
You gotten used to working holidays yet?
I have. I don't think my family has.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that it's unique that the jobs that we have that you always seem to work during the holidays. The only holidays I ever remember celebrate when I was working with the Cowboys or any of my other teams was Memorial Day and 4th of July. Those are the only 2 days of holidays we had. Other than that, you worked on Thanksgiving, you worked on Christmas, you worked on New Year's Eve, so that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, Christmas, typically, we always get off majority of the time.
Yeah, depending on what team you cover,
right.
There's some coaches that care about the holidays, and there's some coaches that just will power through and say, well, we're not going to go in the morning, we'll work in the afternoon and all that. But you get used to it.
Right.
You really do get used to working. But that's the cool thing about now with this job is Christmas time to me always meant playoffs. It always meant the end of the season. And now we're to that point where you're starting to talk about where you're going to be. Are you going to be home for Christmas, or are you going to be playing meaningful games? And this football team's playing meaningful games right now.
Well, and I was always one of those people growing up. So many kids loved Christmas time, right? The presents, the cold. But I was always the person that loved fall because that meant football was back. That was my favorite part.
Your ultimate Christmas gift would be a book on formations and schemes.
Yes.
And how to beat cover 2 that Dak Prescott's seeing right now, right?
Yes, that was.
Have you figured out how to beat this cover 2 yet?
So that was my first. That's my first topic. So teams aren't blitzing; they're rushing forward. They're using the too high shell coverage. Now, what do you think is the best way?
Wow.
To force teams out of that? Is it establishing the run, or do you think it's taking more shots downfield, maybe 4 vertical routes?
Man, you're all over it, because to me, if you watch Monday Night Football and you listen to like Eli Manning and Peyton Manning talk about it, and every time a team got into deep coverage, Peyton Manning's immediately saying, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball.
Light box,
light box, run the ball. And so, the Cowboys did something I honestly didn't think that they were going to do last week. And we talked about it, and that was put Connor Williams back in at left guard. And especially after they said, well, no, we'll put Connor McGovern in there and see what happens. But they're making lineup switches. And I think that's an admirable thing for them to do. You do have to run the ball better. And this is where I'm probably going to make a lot of folks mad, Bree, about this. But
do it.
To me, if teams aren't going to blitz you, play Tony Pollard.
Yep.
Play Tony Pollard. And again, nothing against Zeke. He's a little banged up. He's fighting through a lot of things. I respect him. I really, really do. But when you run the ball, you need to get teams out of this early. Don't let them get in that cover 2 all day and think, you can't block our fronts and you're not going to run the ball because the guy's has no explosive plays in his body right now. So to me, if they're not going to blitz, I'm going to put Tony Pollard in there to start games, and I'm going to try and hit him for some runs, hit him, maybe the first drive, you get the ball to 25 and you got the 75-yard drive, but 30 something of it is Tony Pollard running the football, big chunk plays. And then all of a sudden someone like, when they make adjustments after you score, then they're going to go, well, they're going to run the ball today. We've got to put the safety down. And with Dak, I mean, there's these cover 2 beaters. You talked about 4 vertical. You talked about the combination routes that you can run. You can run outs on it, because again, you've got safeties. They're sitting in the middle of the field. You got the corners. You can run routes. We run outs, and then you run corner routes, and you find holes within. So you're putting pressure on the corner to have to either take the out or take the corner route behind it. And so now you're firing the ball into holes. And, that's where I think the Cowboys, they've got to look for some of those cover 2 beaters. And, and if you do, but getting them out of it by the running, and then find some of those, if they're going to still sit in that, find those cover 2 beaters, the verticals, the corner routes, things like that, that teams run against cover two, because Kansas City was a team very similar to Dallas, where teams were not blitzing Mahomes, and Kansas City figured it out.
Right.
And so the same thing needs to happen with the Cowboys. They need to figure out offensively how to get Dak going, and a lot of it has to do, I think, with the offensive line,
Right.
and get that back to help. I mean, with Tyron Smith, I don't think Tyron's going to play this week. And talking to people in the organization, I kind of felt like that it was going to be like, hey, let's get him ready for the Cardinals game, and so still probably be in Sicky and Steele over there and kind of put it together the best you can.
Right. Well, and I think that's the frustrating part of this, is that it's a perpetual pattern, and we're this many weeks in, and it's the defenses are playing them the same way. They're not doing anything different, but they're not getting creative to beat cover two. But I love what you said about Tony Pollard, because I think every game, I mean, he's always so close to hitting that big run. I mean, the slash running style has explosiveness in space. He's always like a second away from breaking it. I mean, players were, laughing about it on the sounds from the sideline.
Right.
Because I mean, he just has that capability. And I think getting Connor Williams back at left guard, more pulling up front, I think that helped kind of create, stuff to the edges. And then they were able to bring in Connor McGovern in that fullback role.
Right.
And I mean, you look at what the Eagles did against Washington. I mean, they completely gashed them on the ground, whether it was inside, outside. I mean, it didn't really matter.
And it looks like the news coming out of Washington was that Cole Holcomb, the really talented linebacker who had the pick six against Dak last game, is now on the COVID list. So probably won't be playing in the game this week, and that will hurt them. They're really, me personally, Philadelphia is a team that, much like the Indianapolis Colts, they've just determined that their best avenue to winning football games is not let their quarterbacks have to play, but just run the ball. Right. And the Eagles, and we'll see at the end of the year, that is a big, athletic offensive line, and they are doing a great job of just mashing people. And the football team can be tough to run on inside because of Allen and those guys. So I mean, I kind of felt like, though, watching that game, I'm like, man, I go, this is pretty impressive what the Eagles are doing. But you're getting the football team again, just 2 weeks removed. Everybody's pretty fresh on what's going on there. They really shouldn't have been in that football game. Dallas offensively was just not good enough. I mean, that could have been a 35-6 game.
Oh yeah, 24-0.
Well, it could have been just way out of hand. And they just really didn't put any. The last 2 weeks, they really haven't put anybody away when their defense is coming up with all these turnovers and stops and stuff like that. And I kind of still see the same thing for the football team. I don't see anything different offensively. Heineke plays great. Gibson plays great. Receivers. I mean, we'll see with McLaurin and all that, what they can do with that. But, Dallas is going to still be able to get pressure. If you can stop them from running the ball with Gibson, which they've shown they can, then it turns into a track meet. And that's where I think the Dallas Cowboys have the advantage, especially at home. Crowd noise, all those things are going to be a factor in this game this weekend.
Right. What did you think of the in-game rotation at left tackle with Ty Nsekhe, Terrence Steele? Coaching staff seems to think Nsekhe is the better pass protector. Yeah. But what was your thoughts on how that worked?
Well, I admit to you, and I've done this on the show before, is that I want him to play Connor McGovern at left guard.
With all the holding penalties.
Just go ahead and play him at left guard and see what happens. It'll be better. So, I want to believe that Joe Philbin, and I've been on our program again talking about Joe Philbin. I blame some of the offensive struggles with Joe Philbin because of the inconsistencies with the offensive line. They feel like, though, that I think what they're trying to do, Bree, is that they know that Terrence Steele doesn't like playing left tackle. They know that. They know he doesn't feel comfortable playing left tackle. So what happens is if you're going to play 65 plays in a game, well, make him only have to play 40 of those plays. I give Ty Nsekhe the other 25. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing is you're cutting down the opportunity for him to make mistakes. So if the more we do something, the more we do it, the more chance we have of making a mistake. Whereas if you limit the number of opportunities that player has, then you can. Now, is it hard to get into a little bit of a rhythm? They rotate defensive ends, but you rotating offensive linemen is not something I would suggest. But if it limits the number of snaps that Steele could play at left tackle and makes him more comfortable knowing, hey, I've just got to be good for 40 snaps. And then I think that now I'm not a huge Ty and Sicky fan myself, but they feel like that's the rotation that can help them, work the best. We'll see with Montez Sweat this weekend because he's back in the lineup. He was dealing with a broken jaw and then he got COVID right before the game. So we'll see. He's a really good pass rusher, but I'm going to trust him on this one because I'm going to trust him because they went back to Connor Williams. They went back. They said, hey, we were wrong too. Let's put him back in the lineup. And you know what, Bree, to be honest with you, talking to some people around Dak Prescott, the confidence level of the offensive line is really, really, that's something to Dak, that's something I think that has affected him. And, he, having that confidence, that, hey, putting Connor back in there, maybe there's some questions in his mind. Why did we take him out? I understand the holding penalties and stuff, but, that's what he would say is a dog, a dog. I mean, not a, sometimes you say dog and it's a bad thing. He's a bad player, but a dog, like a mean guy, like he's got my back. And I think there's a confidence factor with Dak, with this offensive line, that he knows that, hey, that guy right there's got my back. Not that Connor McGovern wouldn't, but he knows playing with that guy, that Connor Williams, that guy will, if something happens to him in the game, Connor Williams will be the first guy over there. Him and Lyle Collins over there punching somebody to take care of
that. Well, there's more continuity with Williams. Over
he's a more athlete, just better athlete. And that's where they're running the ball better because they weren't getting anybody up. We've talked about this. They weren't getting anybody up on the linebackers. These linebackers who were playing, whether it was in Denver, whether it was the Raiders, they just weren't getting bodies up. And these linebackers were just killing the run, because they were able to just unblock them, balls at the, they try and hit the hole. There's the linebacker right there. And now that Connor Williams, and if the ball does cut back, I think Connor Williams is better at getting up on those linebackers and at least pushing them or shielding them or just kind of brushing them. And that way the ball is going behind them. And that way you have a cut lane there. Whereas before, those linebackers were running pretty free.
Right. Well, and break down a little bit of the pooling. Like Mike McCarthy, the run game worked better in the first half. Mike McCarthy was saying in the second half, they started crashing some of the poolers. It didn't really work as well. Had to make adjustments. And I think one of the issues, too, is our tight ends. I mean, you don't have Blake Jarwin right now, but are not great blockers.
They don't.
We've all seen that with Dalton Schultz. But, I mean, even Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, I mean, several of those big runs with Tony, they were opening those up on the perimeter. So how does that put a stress on a defense, and how do they need to continue that in order to get things going into the second half?
Yeah, I think then, and you're going to love this because this is a term that they use. It's called pin and pull. And what you do is you pin guys, you block down. It's easier for an offensive lineman to block down and shield, stay in the way. If you're not a powerful lineman, every time, when you get into somebody, you're trying to get pushed. But if you get stalemated along the line, the back really has nowhere to go. The back is kind of like, okay, where's the hole? Where's the hole? Where's the hole? And then there's indecision, the hesitation, and then the defense gets him. And so with pin and pull, it's more like, these tight ends who you mentioned, they're not very good blockers. They're really not. And so what you do is you block them down and you block the tackles down. So you pin everybody inside and then you pull around those down blocks. And it's easier for those guys to kind of knock guys. You kind of let them go upfield a little bit and then you pin them inside, you pull around, and then you've got Zach Martin or Connor Williams, those guys blocking on safeties, corners. And, the Cowboys receivers do a good job of getting out there and fighting. They do a really good job, I think, with CD's probably not the biggest guy, but he'll get in the way. Yeah. Amari is a good get in the way guy. I mean, these corners are fighting with him, and then the ball's up the field. So I think you're going to see continue to see more of the pin and pull stuff. I think you're going to continue to see with the gap, what they call gap scheme, where you step to your right, you're responsible to your outside.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody steps right, ball's going to the right, and then you get everybody moving one way, and then the ball either stays front side or the ball can bend back. And that's what we're talking about with Connor Williams on that back side. You get Tyron Smith back in there. Those are two guys that kind of cut things, and it kind of creates just a natural alley. You get everybody moving one way, and then you cut the ball back behind Biotish, and then there's the spots there. So yeah, either pin or pull, and then or the reach scheme or the gap scheme. Everybody pick up a guy, and then they can run it through. They've had some success doing that.
Right. Well, and despite Tyron Smith not being in the lineup, a lot of those runs came on the left side. Credit to Connor Williams in this last game.
Absolutely.
But what are your thoughts on Amari Cooper? So he had 5 targets in the last game, and I mean, a lot of the underneath stuff over the middle has opened up for Dalton Schultz with the way the defenses are playing with the 2 high safeties. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Amari Cooper is about as good of a slant runner as there is in the NFL. Yeah. So, I mean, why not use him more in that capacity? I mean, at the beginning of the season, coaches kind of like with the continuity with the offensive line. I mean, it was like they beat your head over with we want guys to be interchangeable. We want them to line up in the slot out wide. And granted, he's been gone for, a little bit with the COVID stuff, had the hamstring issue earlier on in the season. But I mean, why not use him more in that capacity and line him up inside?
I tell you what, I thought last week the receivers as a whole were going to have a really good game, because the Giants they lost Robinson to COVID before the game. I mean, they lost some players, and I'm thinking, okay, it's Bradbury, it's a bunch of backups, and they don't play tight. They were like they play back, and I'm thinking slants. Ends, slant, in, slant, in. I'm thinking it's 9 catches, 118 yards for Amari Cooper, 1 touchdown. That's what I was kind of thinking. But, with Amari, they haven't got these receivers going. And again, I don't know if it's time on task that, some days you miss Amari, some days you miss Gallup. I mean, this team, I was going through just analytics, and I don't want to just bore people to death with analytics, but the Cowboys, since week 8, they've not completed a deep ball down the right side of the field. They have not. I mean, it's 0 for Amari, 0 for Michael Gallup, and 0 for CeeDee Lamb. I mean, they're the only guy that's having any real production catching the football is Dalton Schultz. And that's in whether you say it's deep middle or short middle or wherever. I mean, however you break down the field, the Cowboys are not getting the ball down the field, at least since week 8, down the field on the right side. And you wonder what's going on there. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is with, again, teams not blitzing, and Dak having, these sacks he's taking. It's like he takes sacks, 1 yard sack, 1 yard sack, 0 yard sack. I mean, he's right around the line of scrimmage taking sacks. And to me, that's hold, try and get out of here. Mm-hmm. And he just can't explode enough to get up the field. And so I think it's Amari. I think it's CeeDee with the drops. I mean, he's got 8 drops this year. And so, it's hard to get any but CeeDee's made a ton of big plays too. Run after catch, big plays. But, Dak's numbers could have been a lot better last week. I mean, numbers wise, not 217 yards passing, 262 yards passing. Oh, yeah. There were these drops are killing him right now. But I think with Amari to me has just not been right all year. And we talk to him every day on our show. I mean, not every day, but every Thursday on our show on 105.3. And he'll say, hey, I'm banged up here. But, for the most part, he's like, man, we're ready to go. We're ready to go play. And I really thought they were going to wear the Giants out last week, and they just didn't. And so that was a little bit of a concern to me, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's another thing with the run game. I think if they're able to get that going and teams allocate more resources, stack the box a little bit, that'll open some of those, one-on-one matchups on the perimeter downfield.
Yeah.
So we'll see that.
No, I mean, it's tough. I mean,
week.
but people, it's funny. And I'm going to ask you this question, and because we get it on our radio show quite a bit, is Kellen Moore holding stuff back? We get this question all the time. Is Kellen Moore holding? I mean, the first 8 weeks of the season, this thing was just ginning on all cylinders.
Right.
It was going. But now people are like, well, they're trying to look for answers. And the answers they're looking at are they holding things back on the offense? I have my thoughts, but I was curious about what you thought. Is Kellen Moore holding stuff back?
I think he is, but they should not be. I mean, this is your top priority right now to get this offense going, the final stretch of the season, the last 3 games. I mean, you've got to get something going to try and keep pace. I mean, the defense getting 4 takeaways every week, you can't bank on them doing that.
Sure.
I mean, going up against the teams once they get into the postseason, I mean, you're not going to be able to get that kind of production against a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers or a Kyler Murray. I mean, these teams aren't going to allow that. And
Right.
so I think they need to get some, and I mean, Kellen Moore was even asked that question, when he said basically that, I mean, you're always kind of looking ahead, but at the same time, here and now, I mean, we've got to get something going at this point. But I mean, you look at the creativity they had at the beginning of the season to now, and I mean, it's night and day. I mean, it's the conservative. They're doing the same things over and over. They're not able to get downfield, not able to run the football, and defenses are playing them the exact same way.
It's funny. I mean, I didn't want to believe it, but I believe there are some truths to this. But I also say, why are they not doing the basic stuff any good? I mean, that's the thing. If you're going to hold back and you're a good off, and you think, okay, we're a really good offense, so we're going to hold stuff back, then why are they not even doing the basic stuff good?
Right.
That's the problem I have. I mean, to me, that pass they tried to throw, that Dak got sacked and fumbled, and the Giants ended up with the ball and you're into the field. That's an unnecessary play.
Oh, yeah.
That's a totally unnecessary play. And it might have been a play that Dak checked to. Late in the game, deep shot. You're playing great defense. Mike Glennon's not going to beat you. You don't have to take those shots. But to me, they're not even doing the basic stuff good. So, but I see them take a shot like that. I'm like, well, that's a deep crosser. Oh, that's kind of a creative thing. You're taking
Where
a
was
receiver.
that earlier?
You're taking a receiver and you're running him all the way across the field. That's there's things I think they're showing. I just don't think they're very good at the base stuff right now. And I think that's the biggest problem. If they're holding stuff back, then to me, shame on them. You want this offense, you want confidence with Dak, the offensive line. If it takes being more creative to make plays or to get the offense going, by all means, be creative. I don't know if this is one of those things you just flip a switch and say, oh, everything's good. I mean, maybe it will be when Tyron's there, the receivers have had more time together, or, being more healthy. Zeke gets a little bit more healthy. Maybe they play Tony Pollard a little more. So I don't know. I just was curious because there's some people that honestly believe that Kellen Moore's holding back stuff. And I just find
at this point, I don't know how you could say that when they've been in such a rut at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, even if he was doing that initially, okay, well, when you've had several weeks when the same thing is happening and you're not getting any better and there's still the miscommunication issues, the decision making's off, the drops, can't get the run game going. At some point, you've got to get something going.
I agree. I mean, that's where, to me, I start to, if you're holding stuff back, I would start to incorporate it now. I mean, I think what you're seeing with Dan Quinn is doing the opposite. He didn't have Tank Lawrence. He didn't have Neville Gallimore. He lost Randy Gregory for part of the season. He had to do things to kind of play safeties at linebackers at defensive ends. Now he's showing teams like, okay, I'm going to cover all your offensive linemen and I'm going to blitz Micah Parsons on a running back and see if you can cover that and see if you can block that. I mean, he's doing the total opposite of what supposedly going on with the offense. He's like, I'm showing you this. I'm going to make you work on this. So to me, I like Dan Quinn's approach because I think they're ramping up so that teams are like, oh, that's what they do. Teams are looking at the Cowboys now, and if the last day since week 8, if they're just saying, oh, we'll play cover 2 and it's okay, they're not going to do anything. Maybe that's what they want them to think. Me personally, I think Kellen Moore needs to get this thing going.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Mike McCarthy, I think you need to get this thing going. I think you need to get Dak Prescott going, the offensive line going, the running game going, the receivers, tight ends. I think you need to kind of get some things going. If you're holding back thinking that, and in one game you're just going to flip a switch, I don't know if necessarily that's a very good thing to think about. I really don't. Now, if they've been doing this, if they've been doing this all year, and then you get to the playoffs and they fall flat on their face, we've seen teams like, wow, to me, if Philadelphia got into playoffs and they stopped running the ball, then I would go, wait a minute, you got in the playoffs by running the football. The Indianapolis Colts, you got in the playoffs by running the football and playing really great defense. If they all of a sudden said, oh, we're going to put it in Carson Wentz's hands and let him win, I think that's a terrible idea. So to me, I can't believe they would hold stuff. I just can't believe that.
Well, and I don't think, like you said, I mean, they need to start using stuff now, but this isn't something that's going to go away in one game. You know, I mean, this miscommunication, I mean, God, the overthrowing the football or the receivers running a completely different way. Yeah. I mean, they've got to get that figured out. And I know they're working on it after practice. They're staying later. But, I mean, those are the things that you have to do to try and fix what's going on. But like you said, I mean, Dan Quinn, and he hasn't even, players are saying it, he hasn't even used, they still have a ton of blitz packages, pass rush stunts that they haven't even. And that's one of my favorite things is
you might as well see it. Yeah.
He plays into player strengths, but he's not scared to step out of the box. I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence on an inside stunt. Yeah. When have we seen that? Or the same with Randy Gregory. And he even told me back, I asked him about it, have you ever played inside? Is that something you've done? And he said, he occasionally did it at Nebraska, but he said, it wasn't his favorite thing doing it, but because of Dan Quinn and the trust that they have in Dan Quinn, he loves it. And he's like, wherever you want me, put me there.
It might get him home. It gets him closer to the ball and he might beat a guy one-on-one, especially if you got Micah Parsons, Randy fires into the B gap between the tackle and the guard. Micah fires in the A gap between the center and the guard. Now you've got these guys all stressed and pressured. Might free you up. You're right there on the quarterback, and you get a sack that way. So there's total buy-in. There's total buy-in with this.
Neville Gallimore back in the interior, getting upfield. Yeah. Who is your defensive MVP?
Dan Quinn.
I love it. Absolutely no hesitation.
You didn't say player, right?
Right. I didn't. I just said defensive. So
I'd say the defensive coaches, to be honest with you, if you really want to. I mean, I'll give you an answer of player. It's easy to say Micah Parsons, because of all the things he's done. But Jeff Kavanaugh, who I work with on 105.3 The Fan, yesterday, he and I were discussing, could in the last 3 games and into the playoffs, could Tank Lawrence be your best defensive player? And it's hard to think of because you're thinking, well, Micah. But what you've seen with Tank, last week you won a game, you played really well on defense with Tank punching out a ball, Tank playing the run, Tank getting pressure. We could see Tank Lawrence, healthy, fresh body, didn't have to go through the grind of the season now. This might be a thing. This might be a thing where these next 3 games and into the playoffs, maybe Tank Lawrence becomes like your best player on defense. But, man, there's so many guys you could talk about. You could talk about those corners. You could talk about Diggs, Brown. Those guys have been outstanding. Jordan Lewis, Curse. It's really easy to say Micah Parsons because he's got a shot being the defensive player of the year. But if you have to say to me, like Dan Quinn and this defensive staff, what they've done, because they really weathered the storm. They didn't have, the offense had their best players for the most part. Defense didn't have all their best players. And Dan Quinn figured out ways, like I said, safety playing linebacker playing defensive end, mix and match, got some rookies ready to play, with Oso Digizawa and those guys playing. Basham. I mean, they've gotten guys ready to play that have stepped up and played pretty well for them. Dorrance Armstrong, I think, is having the best year he's ever had. Because he was always been one great game and then 3 games you don't even see him. So I think it really is Dan Quinn. I think him and his staff they've just totally they've put a lot of pressure on this offense. They're like, listen, because
the turnovers and touchdowns, but
yeah,
I'm for it.
That's what I'm saying. You put a lot of pressure on this offense because now you've got a defense that can go win games. And all they need is this offense to come back around to what it was. And this team could be a Super Bowl team.
Yeah, nobody could stop.
Yeah.
Could stop that.
The way
the offense was playing at the beginning of the year.
You score 30, 35 points a game with this defense. Heck, you scored 28 points a game. This defense is going to shut people out. And so that's the challenge now. The last 3 games, win them all, stay in that 2nd seed, try and avoid playing San Francisco or somebody like that in that 6th seed. That's a team I surely don't want to play. I mean, there's some teams, most of the teams that are battling for spots in this playoff, the Cowboys have beaten, whether it's the Saints, the Vikings, the Falcons, Eagles, they're all battling for those spots. San Francisco is the one team you haven't played, and they're sitting in the 6th seed right now. They look really, really, really good. San Francisco, to me, is one of those teams that if the first weekend of the playoffs, San Francisco, if all things held, San Francisco could go to Tampa and beat Tampa. And then all of a sudden now you would then San Francisco then would go to Green Bay, and then you would get Rams or Arizona, and then you take your chances there. But I mean, to me, San Francisco is a team, and maybe I'll be way wrong about this, but I kind of feel like they're a team that's going that way right now. So I don't want to play them yet. Play them in the NFC Championship game.
Certainly not until our offense gets.
Yeah, that's true.
Gets on track.
Yep.
Yeah, but we'll see this week against the
Got 3 more
Washington
weeks,
football
right?
team.
We didn't talk about the football team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Happy holidays to you.
Yes. Merry early Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you as well.
Yes. And our episode will be up on my YouTube channel. Stay tuned for next week and more on the Blitz Crosstalk.